Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Conrad Gorlinski. An amendment to the media law regulating foreign ownership in the Polish media market is causing increasing confusion. Rumors about potential U.S. sanctions against Poland have been denied by the Polish government. Discovery, the owner of TVN, has announced a fierce battle for the station. A number of Polish media outlets have published information from unnamed sources claiming that the U.S. could impose sanctions on Poland, and in particular on state representatives. The media, which spreads hysteria and threatens us with sanctions, are in fact defending their own interests, or rather their misunderstood interests. They are trying to put Poland on the level of Belarus or Putin's Russia, but this is the kind of argument that they use to tarnish the image of Poland. Among the alleged sanctions for Poland would be the cancellation of the contract for the hundreds of Abrams tanks that Poland will acquire in the coming years. Mirosław Skowron from Polish Radio 24 argues that the U.S. would not risk violating its interests. The Americans want to sell their weapon systems, and especially the kinds of systems that are not covered by some super technological secrets. Poland is just too big of a market for the U.S. to ignore. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has reiterated that it is the Polish parliament which is responsible for passing laws in Poland, just as the law in the United States is made by the U.S. Congress, and there should be no interference in Poland's internal affairs. Representatives of the Venezuelan government and the opposition have met in Mexico City for the start of negotiations aimed at overcoming Venezuela's acute political and economic crisis, which has caused millions to flee the Latin American nation. Unlike previous negotiation efforts, the talks will include more than a dozen countries. Among them, the Netherlands, Russia, Bolivia, Turkey, and Norway, which will act as facilitators. At the National Museum of Anthropology, the parties agreed to a memorandum of understanding containing the roadmap that will guide the dialogue process. For the talks to advance to a potential agreement, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro demands that sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe on officials and institutions be lifted. Venezuela says the sanctions are responsible for the OPEC members' economic crisis. Today, we are starting the second stage of the negotiation process, which we know will be very complex. There will certainly be difficult moments for which everyone in our team has come prepared. The previous exploratory phase culminates today. It has not been easy to agree on an agenda, to discuss and develop the guidelines and format for which the negotiations will take place. The return to the negotiating table represents a turnaround for the opposition, which in the past accused Maduro of using dialogue to buy time and diffuse international pressure. The Venezuelan government abandoned the 2019 dialogue, which took place in Barbados and Norway, after the United States tightened sanctions. Our Venezuela is in a very bad state, very bad for our people, suffering from the worst crisis in modern history. Our homeland has little to offer for the personal development of citizens, of each father and mother, of each young person, child, elderly person. Part of our people have fled and continue to flee in search of opportunity outside of our borders. President Joe Biden has not relaxed sanctions against the financial and oil sectors of Venezuela since taking office, and has maintained support for opposition leader Juan Guaido, who has declared himself interim president after claiming there was fraud in Maduro's 2018 re-election. The Venezuelan crisis has generated a massive exodus of 7 million people, the largest in the world, exceeding the likes of Syria. The World Health Organization on Friday has urged countries to collaborate on further studies of the origins of the virus, saying that the process was proving difficult after the findings from the initial China mission proved inconclusive. The inability of the WHO to say where and how the virus began spreading has meant that tensions among its members, especially between the United States and China, where COVID-19 cases were first identified in December 2019, have continued. The WHO now calls for all governments to cooperate to accelerate studies into the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic and to depoliticize the situation. To that end, it specified that a new advisory group called the International Scientific Advisory Group for Origins of Novel Pathogens will support the rapid undertaking of further studies.
We are proposing to member states to discuss with us and with the scientific community the next steps. And as we always say, all hypotheses are on the table. We need to understand. It's difficult. It's a difficult process. It will take time, and the scientists need to have the space to be able to work in a quiet manner without political pressure or political debate. This is a scientific work.
Tensions have centered on the question of whether a China laboratory leak could have occurred. The WHO mission in March called that scenario extremely unlikely, saying the virus had probably been transmitted from bats to humans through another animal, but that further research was needed.
The WHO has called for all member states and for all government not to enter into political fights. This is a scientific endeavor. We need to do scientific research to understand the situation and to cooperate, to accelerate the origin studies and to work together in a true spirit of cooperation to understand this virus and also to be able to understand future viruses, because this pandemic, as we say every time, is not the first one.
In May, U.S. President Joe Biden ordered his aides to find answers on COVID-19 origins and causes of COVID-19 and report back in 90 days. And the EU's border agency Frontex has started trialing new high-tech surveillance equipment to detect migrant boats, just as rapid gains by Taliban fighters in Afghanistan have raised the prospect of a surge in people fleeing to Europe. Frontex representatives also say that the recent unrest in Tunisia could also lead to a new migration route opening. A balloon system equipped with cameras is being tested at Alexandroupolis Airport near the Greek-Turkish land border in northeastern Greece and on the island of Limnos, with the aim of giving border officials a clearer view of approaching boats. Planned before recent Taliban advances in Afghanistan, it is part of a wider effort that includes analysis of emerging pressures from the region.
We are observing and following the developments specifically in Afghanistan and Tunisia, which might have an effect on the migratory flows towards the European Union.
The integrated mix of cameras and thermovision sensors with links to ship transponders and satellite communications gives officials a real-time view of a 60-kilometer circle of sea, covering 40,000 square kilometers.
Aerostat is designed to surveillance 24/7 maritime area, so we can monitor all the operations in a circle of 60 kilometers. So it gives us around 40,000 square kilometers of area of observation. We can monitor real-time movement in the maritime area, so border surveillance in the seas, in the maritime area might be greatly improved because of these innovative systems.
Several EU countries have stopped forced returns of Afghans refused asylum, while the fighting intensifies. But Greek Migration Minister Notis Mitarachi said this week the EU could not handle another major migration crisis. After a slowdown last year when coronavirus lockdowns limited movement, irregular migrant arrivals into the EU through the Western Balkans have almost doubled this year. And thanks for tuning in this evening. Have a wonderful Saturday night.